During the Vietnam War, soldiers were given special night vision goggles. But there was more to it. These goggles were said to see a broader color spectrum not visible before. The story goes that soldiers started freaking out or even losing their minds because, horrifyingly, the goggles were able to see demons. After that, night vision goggles were supposedly modified to not show those creatures. But what's the real story? Is this just an urban legend, a leak about something that actually happened, or a disinformation campaign about advanced military technology? Do special ops use such equipment today? And is there any data we can find about the mysterious happenings in the jungle during the Vietnam War? I'll share my investigative research and tell you why I think the Predator movie was real, and John will share his remote viewing data that you're definitely not going to hear anywhere else. I mean, who else has a team who can peer into the past and report back what they find? Join us for a metaphysical show that's out of this world. I have a theory, that I hope this podcast is going to prove, that a lot of movies in the 80s, and not necessarily just the 80s, but a lot of movies were based off of real stories that happened and got, of course, modified a little bit. But are more.
What movies?
Oh, man, I can name a bunch. And then not just movies, but series as well.
Right.
So when you think about Close Encounters of the Third Kind, there's been information out for a long time that Steven Spielberg received files and documentation from three-letter agencies that gave him basically the lowdown on that story, and he created a movie out of it.
Well, he also had J. Allen Hynek working on that movie, who was the guy who was running Project Blue Book for the Air Force.
Yeah, and what I heard was that if you were to combine the movies of E.T. and Close Encounters of the Third Kind, you'd have basically the whole story. However, E.T.'s finger, in the movie had this like healing ability that they did to kind of appease the whole, like, this is a movie for kids thing. But in reality, the finger was like a death ray. Like whatever it touched, it would kill or like dissolve.
Right.
Which, is that true or not? It's a great story. But if it's true that he received these briefings before he went out to make these movies, that's pretty incredible. Why did the Predator story take off? Some of these movies, I feel like people are aware that there's more truth to them than just it being a cool fictional story.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, like a lot of movies are just soft disclosure. I mean, like the
Correct.
movie Stargate, right? That was awesome movie.
It was like awesome.
Yeah. And so I think that a lot of movies are just soft disclosure.
Yeah, and what better way to get people off the scent of these things than to make it into something that's fictional and sort of appease people's minds around it? Once it becomes fiction, it's so hard to then prove that thing is real.
Right, because everybody could say, oh, it's just sci-fi, those crazy ideas you're putting forth.
And here we've got a very interesting story. We're going to, in this podcast, go through what these Dicyanin glasses or goggles are and why there may be more truth than fiction to these things actually seeing things in other dimensions, and then how the Predator movie basically was laid out and why you should probably look at that movie more like a documentary than anything else.
Oh, no.
It's going to be fun. But first of all, before we get into that, how do basically night vision goggles, the current ones that we use out there, how do they work? And you have a pair of these night vision goggles that we were using when we were down in South Washington together, right?
I mean, these guys right here, you see that? Night vision really just amplifies existing light, and it uses thermal imaging as well as captures infrared light. Just creates a situation where you can see in extremely low light conditions. It uses these amplifier tubes within it. And there are different generations of night vision goggles. I think Vietnam War would have been first
generation 1? Yeah.
Yeah, first sub 1, maybe even. They would have been very, very difficult to see through. Just a mass of green with hard to see figures, most
Right.
likely. Whereas Gen 3, the ones that we have the most access to on the civilian side today, are pretty nice. They're pretty sharp. I mean, you know that. They're pretty clear. You like saw when we were in that deep, dark forest, pitch black in front of your eyes, can't even see your hand in front of your face. The night vision just lit it up,
Yeah,
and
you can see
especially if you've got
everything.
an IR light as well, an IR light source, you can see anything. So
I didn't even realize how bright the IR like the IR was until the night vision goggles went on, because you can't see
yeah,
IR with your naked eye.
we have IR receptors on the edges of our vision, right?
And actually, what is IR, John, just for the folks at home?
Oh, well, it's infrared light spectrum. What are we looking at? Like 700, 9 to 900 nanometer
Yeah.
range, in that general realm, where the eyes cannot pick up. It's not invisible light for us, but it is a light spectrum that some animals can see. Bigfoot purportedly can see into that spectrum. And that's why it doesn't step in front of trap cams, because trap cams will use an IR light to capture stuff. And just your phone camera will pick up IR light.
Right.
If you have an infrared light source, just flip on your phone camera and look through it, and you'll see that light source flashing that your eyes can't see. So, cameras in general can, especially if you take a camera and you remove the IR filter. The optics that we use for cameras do not exclude IR light. So they have to put a little filter just behind the lens in order to block that light. But if you go in and physically remove it, you've got yourself an IR camera that can pick things up that your eyes can't see. So, and this goes into the stuff that you see on the sides of your vision too. It's all the same thing. And believe me, there are more of those things around us all the time than you would even begin to fathom. And we can perceive things in the corners of our eyes that are truly real things, just like IR cameras can capture. This one house, for instance, which has a portal in, I've been in that many, 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 many times. And I've seen out of the corner of my eye small figures running around, right? And since I know,
What?
yes, absolutely, you see them running. And so I trained myself to be able to pay attention to the stuff that happens in the corners of my eyes. And I can see things. It's like, okay, so if you're a kid, like one of the things you do when you were a kid, at least in the 80s, I don't know if kids do that now, is go out in the night and play hide and seek with your brothers and sisters or your friends, and the way you would see them, because they can hide in plain sight when it's dark, the way you can see them or any movement is by moving your eyes back and forth and catching that side vision, right? So if you move your eyes back and forth, you have a better chance of like seeing clearly out of the corners of your eyes, right? And then you can see them because we've got those IR receptors right there. And when you see something in the corner of your eye moving, you are not tripping out. You're seeing into another dimension, literally
Yeah.
seeing these beings that are around us all of the time. So, I mean, yeah, like things like this are impressive, but until you begin to actually develop this side vision, that's the most impressive thing to me, because then you don't need these types of things.
Even according to mainstream science, your peripheral vision is more sharp for urgent emergency type things. The fight or flight part of your eye is all on the peripheral, like what's coming at you from different directions. So if you can hone that or
Right.
train that part of yourself, you're absolutely going to see more. And we don't even understand the parts that you're talking about, which is that if it's picking up any type of IR, then what more? What's so interesting about Generation 1 night vision is that we're going back to a time where we relied more on analog technology. And what dicyanin is basically is a dye. And I believe the dye was put in the goggles, and you're looking through this dye to see what's on the other side, essentially. And so now you've got a physical substance that you're looking through, a potent physical substance, very hard to make. Right? Who was the guy that created the dicyanin? His name is Walter John Kilner. I'm pretty sure he was developing this technology to be able to see auras in the past. Is that true?
Yeah, he was early 1900s, late 1800s. Yeah, he was a
Wow.
physician, and he was, I think his main thing was electrotherapy, right? Which, I mean, think about like medical science or science in general back at that time frame was totally different than it is now. Totally different.
And this is the time period when Mary Shelley's Frankenstein came out, when they were looking at reanimating the human body and how electricity affected the body and what it could potentially do. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein was this idea that if you put a bunch of body parts together and you figured out how electricity ran through the body, you could reanimate it and jumpstart the brain again and create a new creature. In place of intelligence, we got the bizarre and a monster killing everyone, which was a premonition of the future. Really, like if we do this, you're playing with fire. You're sort of playing God, and it's going to blow up in your face. But yes, so the dicyanin goggles were, the spiritual movement was really strong at that time, late 1800s, early 1900s. Everyone was very interested in the different energies of the human body. They were trying to prove that life existed after death. And if someone could develop a technology that showed the energy, showed auras, this would be a step in that direction. And we had many, many men, influential men, that were fascinated with the spiritual movement at that time, right? All over the world, Britain, America, lots of people had lost loved ones during World War II. And so these technologies were, a lot of them were developed to the end of trying to prove life after death. And I think what they got in this case was a little bit more than that. They were
Right. Well,
seeing
I mean, like Kilner, he was legit. He worked as a British medical electrician. He wrote books and papers and stuff, but his biggest thing was the human atmosphere. A member of the Royal College of Physicians, and this was his biggest study on the human atmosphere, which is the aura. He was taking different dyes and putting them between slides. They called them the Kilner slides, because he was trying to train his eyes and others' eyes to be able to see the energy field around a person's body, because he thought it was some kind of, like, I think, ultraviolet or electromagnetic or some type of radiation. So he found this substance from coal tar called dicyanin and put that between the slides. Here you have, late 1800s, a very legit physician, doctor, big in the British medical community, who writes a book on the aura. This was okay back then, right?
Yeah.
This was an interesting and a good thing for medical science to study. And so he thought, that the aura is one of those things that will determine health conditions of a person, emotional states of a person, which is really actually quite cool, perfectly exact when it comes to remote viewing. Because in remote viewing, what we have is these systems of medical remote viewing, for entertainment purposes only. When we look at a person, we will isolate the aura from the body and we'll begin to probe the aura. And you can see in the aura different parts of the body that have a different color, or they're more squished in, or they're murky or thicker than other parts. And those parts are always connected to some type of physical condition that is going on with them, some type of emotional condition that is going to turn into a physical condition that's detrimental to them, or a disease that they are on the verge of getting. If you could learn how to read the aura like we do in remote viewing, you can understand what's happening to a person a little bit deeper, as well as what's going to potentially happen to a person by them carrying something like this in their energy field. So he was dead on, right? Dead on with this. And then medical science just shut all those avenues off and went in a completely different direction.
You're kind of blowing my mind right now because actually, for those of you at home that think what John's talking about is some woo-woo BS or something like that, actually, Chinese medical doctors for thousands of years have been talking about and doing what John just said. Like there are even documented cases of this happening where the future of the entire country depended on some of these medical doctors. Like there was a medical doctor in Chinese history called Hua Tuo, and he predicted that the emperor of the time had a tumor in his head. And the emperor thought that he wanted to operate on him to take out the tumor because he was trying to kill him. So he had the medical doctor killed. A couple of months later, he found out he did have a tumor. And well, he didn't have him killed. He had him put in prison, to be fair. But he died in prison. The medical doctor died in prison. And this guy, I think his name was Cao Cao, right? Was his name Cao Cao? He ends up dying because there was a tumor in his head and no one else could have operated on it except this guy. And he actually saw it. But I mean, to us who don't necessarily have these abilities, you'd think it was crazy if someone was talking to you about this and seeing those things in the aura or in a person's body using your celestial eye. But no, in fact, when times were different, men across the world were using these techniques to actually find sickness in someone's body. So the idea that a substance could be rendered to see some things in other dimensions is totally possible. I mean, what is your brain but an organic substance that's somehow translating what your eyes are seeing?
So this guy had, squished some of this coal tar substance between slides, and we looked at his reaction, like what he was feeling, what he saw at the moment that he put this stuff in front of his eyes.
You're talking about Kilner now. So
I'm talking about Kilner.
You guys remote viewed what Kilner was seeing when he first looked through these Dicyanin goggles or the lenses.
Yeah, what he's seeing is one thing, but when you turn it around and look at how a person's reacting as well, you get a much broader picture of truly what's happening. So his emotional reaction was absolutely through the roof. He was astounded. He was also freaked out. He was freaked out. He was like, he couldn't believe what was happening. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Then what he was seeing was along the lines of apparitional type things in the room in front of him. There were things moving around. There weren't like demons or anything that was described. It was literally like paraphysical entities that were moving in front of him and in the room. And so he was really confused about this. But then when he had a subject and he was still seeing these apparitional type things around, as well as an auric field around the subject, he realized what he was dealing with, like really narrowing down into a specific frequency of infrared light. And I think that's what these things did. I think the coal tar was able to narrow down the frequency of infrared light where there's a lot of activity happening. Like night vision and IR in general is too broad of a spectrum. And I think when you narrow it down to one of the more specific zone, a specific area, you will see more. That is what I think was going on with this stuff, because what he was seeing was at least from my perspective on the remote viewing side, was much clearer than what you would get with general IR or general like night vision. From the data I have on that, it does look like, yes, he was able to filter it down to a very specific narrow frequency zone in order to see things that were just blowing his mind.
So we have a story here, or multiple stories of soldiers in Vietnam using this Generation 1 night vision and seeing things similar to what you just explained.
Yeah, but isn't the story that like they were using this?
Yes.
Specifically, it wasn't like it wasn't the like amplifier tube in regular night vision. It was like
Generation 1 Dicyanin. We hope you liked this metaphysical episode. Remember to like and subscribe to help the channel grow. If you like what we do and want more, we couldn't end this conversation here because it goes way deeper than this. If you want to hear the rest of this bonus content, you can subscribe to the Mystery Junkie tier or higher on the Metaphysical.tv. That will get you access to exclusive Metaphysical episodes, director cuts, and topics you won't see anywhere else. Plus, your subscription to the Metaphysical.tv also gets you about 1,000 more episodes on mysteries, ancient civilizations, cryptids, UFOs, and other awesome topics. You can also get a bag of delicious Metaphysical coffee if you want your mornings to be interstellar, or Metaphysical merch so everyone knows how much you like Bigfoot.
John, thanks so much for being here. And for those of you at home, we hope you guys thought this episode was as out of this world as we did.